In today's video, I'm going to show you one simple idea that if you can learn how to use this one simple idea in your own games correctly, your rating will improve so fast you will not believe it. All right, in the game, I open 1d4, and my opponent here, Bob the Grob, he plays what I can only describe as a modified Grob opening with the move 1h6. Now, if you don't know, the Grob opening is where white opens 1g4, I believe, and black here intending the fastest possible g5 that won't lose the pawn outright on the spot. So Bob the Grob living up to the Grob in his name. Very funny here. All right, we have c4, g5, not phased. I go e4, gaining space in the center. Black goes bishop g7. Then we have knight to c3. So far, I'm ignoring his idea. I'm just developing. Yes, there were stronger ways to play. Yes, a fast h4 may have been a little bit more precise, but knight c3, nothing wrong with that at all. Now here, black plays a move that I see this all the time in my own online games. He plays the move c5. Now, this is by far one of the trickiest ideas that black can play. All the time, black players, when I play 1d4, they'll go for a fast c5 and go for these really weird, modified, modern Benini openings, and they are quite tricky unless you know what you're doing as white, because if you do, they're actually quite easy, and it's like free ELO online. All right, here, d5 is the move, gaining space. That is my standard reaction to any kind of fast c5 in the opening by black. Now here, black has the option of trading on c3, giving up his dark squared bishop for the knight. Now, fortunately for me, he did not do this, but even if he does, that is very risky, as here, black's kingside is going to be very, very vulnerable. The dark squares will be very, very easy to attack later in the game. So black did not go for that. Instead, d6 is the move. Now here, I do go h4, attacking these pawns. My idea is, well, these pawns are quite vulnerable. If black does nothing, I take on g5 once with the pawn, and then twice with the bishop and win a pawn on the spot. Therefore, black's going to have to respond somehow to the threat. Now here, he does go g4, gaining space on the king side, but in doing so, he weakens a lot of squares. Now, so far, I've mostly moved pawns in the opening. I moved, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 out of 6 moves were pawn moves, and I really do need to start developing. So the one rule you must know is how to find plans out of the opening and in the middle game, and the best way to do that is just to look at the pawn structure. The pawn structure will essentially tell you where all of your pieces need to go. Now, in this position right here, with the pawn on g4, actually, f3 is not a good square for this knight. However, g3 is a wonderful square for this knight. And from there, it's eyeing h5, it's eyeing f5, it supports e4, and so on. So my plan here, I want to go knight g to e2, then g3, then bishop e2, and then perhaps bishop f4 and queen d2. To me, that is probably the most logical way to proceed here. So I continue here. Well, I wasted on the pawn move. h5, 6 out of 7 pawn moves so far. All right, knight f6. And now here, I get going with my plan. So, knight g to e2 played in the game. A very, very good move. Again, g3 is just a fantastic square for that knight. And if black ever goes, say, knight b d7, then that knight will be eyeing the f5 square, and that could get very dicey for black. So, knight b d7, knight g3, again eyeing f5 immediately. Black must react. He goes knight to e5, guarding the f5 square with the bishop, so I can't jump in yet. But I continue, bishop e2, a good square for the bishop. Black goes a6, and now here, a4 is likely the best move here, clamping down on any kind of b5 nonsense from black. Instead, I continue with my plan, bishop f4. And as you can see, going from 6 out of 7 first moves being pawn moves, I now have a lot of pieces out, and they're all occupying simply fantastic squares. Again, my idea is queen d2. I can castle either on the king side or the queen side, depending on how the game goes, and I've got a really pleasant position. Black's pawn on g4 is quite vulnerable, and overall, his king side just looks really, really weak to me. All right, here, he actually goes knight e d7. So here, black went knight d to e5, and then knight e to d7. He's kind of going back and forth with his pieces. This is how you know black here really doesn't have any kind of plan. I've already stumped him. Black here, he doesn't want to castle, as then his king is vulnerable on the king side, but beyond that, there's almost nothing he can do that would actually benefit his position, which is pretty remarkable. Now here, with that knight on d7, knight f5 is a fantastic idea, but instead here, I do capture the free pawn. So bishop takes, knight takes, and then queen takes. That is the next step in my plan. Now here, black does trade on c3. That is an option, but honestly, once you give up that dark squared bishop, you are in a lot of trouble as black here. So instead, rook g8 may have been the better idea. Instead, bishop takes played in the game. I take back with the b pawn. Then we have knight to f6, attacking the queen. I go queen to e2, a good square for the queen. And from here, it is supporting various e5 ideas, which would exploit the awkward placement of the knight on f6. Now here, black goes queen to a5, targeting the pawn on c3. And here, I actually don't have to defend this pawn. It turns out that pawn is just superfluous, and I can simply castle and get on with the attack ASAP. But instead, I do defend in the game. Queen d3, not a bad move, just not the most precise move in that position. Now, black goes b5. Black is trying to get some sort of counterplay going, and it makes a lot of sense. Let's say black slow plays it and goes, say, bishop to d7. I mean, obviously, he can't castle here, as then this pawn's going to fall. So that is just how bad black's game is. But let's say he plays more of a waiting move. Bishop d7. The problem here is e5 is coming. I can simply go e5, opening up the center, and I can always castle short later if I need to. Meanwhile, black cannot castle short, and his king is going to be, you know, just left wide open here. So black, he's trying to find some way to fight back. He plays the move b5. And now here, in this position, it's very important to understand pawn structure and the initiative and some different concepts. So here, obviously, black is threatening to capture on c4, but to me, that's not really that important. What's more important is this e5 break and exposing the black king on the e8 square. So here, I simply ignore this pawn threat, and I just go e5, so playing an intermediate move, fighting for the initiative. So black here, he sort of has to respond. Now, black does play the intermediate move, b takes c4. He targets the queen. Therefore, if I take on f6, I lose my queen. So here, I do have to capture this pawn back first. So we do queen takes c4. Black here, you know, this is just not a good position for black at all. He's really getting smacked for his dubious Grob-style opening. Black here is sort of forced to capture on e5. If he goes, say, knight d7, I trade on d6, maybe trade again, perhaps castle and go rook e1, and black here is in a lot of pressure. So d takes played in the game. I take back. But now this knight is pinned to the rook, and beyond that, I can simply capture the knight on f6 if I want to, and that does happen in the game. So black, rook g8, not a bad idea per se, but here, I just capture the knight. Bishop takes, e takes, and now look at black's king. I mean, I castle, my king is safe. Black cannot castle on the king side legally as this rook already moved, and beyond that, I mean, look at this. Rook to e1 is coming. Rook a d1 is coming. Perhaps d6, d7 is coming, opening up lines on the king side. Knight at e4 or f5 could be coming. I mean, all of my pieces here are really, really working together. And black here, what is the queen doing? What is his rook doing? What is his bishop doing? I mean, black here just has not found a good plan and good squares for his pieces. So black here, he tries to fight back. And trust me, this game is about to get way more interesting. I make some, you know, let's just keep going here. All right, rook g5 played in the game. Rook f to e1. Again, part of my plan, targeting the weak king on the e8 square. King to f8. The king cannot castle now. I have the king right where I want him. Now, what is the next step of my plan? Well, here, this rook's quite active. This knight is on a decent square, as is the queen. My worst placed piece right now has to be this rook on the a1 square. So the next phase of my plan is getting that rook over into the game. And here's how I do it. A very simple idea. Rook to e3, intending rook a, e1, and from there, potentially, ideas like rook to e8. Now, black here, bishop d7, a good move. And here I go queen to e4, sliding over my queen. The idea is I want to go queen h7, trying to cut off the king on the king side. And from there, I will perhaps go rook a to e1 and so on, threatening rook to e8 with a good game. So how is black going to respond? Well, he just goes for actually a pretty decent move, rook to e8, activating his rook finally. This being the idea of bishop d7, getting the bishop off the back rank, and then going rook to e8. Now here, I've got to find the right idea, and it turns out I need to keep my queen closer towards the center, and for that reason, something like queen to f4 or queen d3 is the right idea, but instead of that, I actually go for my idea of queen to h7. Now, at first glance, this looks all right, but it turns out black here has some simple ways to kind of fight back and seize the initiative. He takes on e3, a logical idea. The point being, if I take back with the pawn, I lose the knight and maybe even the game. Now, my idea here was to take on h6, as I did in the game. Queen takes h6. But it turns out here in this position, black can just go for the move king to g8, and I'm out of checks, believe it or not. I mean, from there, there's no way for me to actually deliver a check on the king, and my attack is actually running out of steam. So I made some tactical mistakes here, some simple miscalculations, but fortunately, black did not go king g8. Instead, rook g7 was played by Bob the Grob in the game, and I'm right back in business. All right, now here. Queen takes is the right idea, but I'm getting a little bit flustered, and instead, I capture with the f-pawn. Of course, the problem with this, black can swoop in and capture the knight on the g3 square. All right, things are getting very messy in this game. So here, instead, black first takes on c3. Queen takes c3, wins the pawn, and targets the rook on the a1 square. So my rook is under attack. I go rook to f1, sliding it over to the king side where it's nice and safe and where it's also quite active on the f-file here. Now black goes king to g8, sliding his king over. I go king to h2, defending the knight. Then we have queen to e5. Black slides back and centralizes the queen, trying to defend. Now here, white has a few different good ideas. One very simple one is just queen f4, offering a trade of queens. That would be quite good for me. Instead, in the game, rook to f3 was my idea. The point being, I'm trying to defend that knight on the g3 square. Of course, the queen was adding some pressure to it, so that was necessary. Now black, bishop g4, again, trying to overload all the pieces. But here, I go for sort of a clever move. Queen takes f6. The point being, if black takes the rook on the f3 square, I take the queen and I win his queen. On the other hand, if black takes on f6, I take back and I win the pawn on f6 and I keep my rook alive. So here, I'm feeling pretty good. Now black takes the pawn on d5, queen takes d5, and at this point, my opponent has 21 seconds left on the clock, and I start to sort of pressure Bob the Grob in time pressure here. And I play a cheeky idea, h6, threatening checkmate in one move. And my idea is, whether it's good or bad, and it turns out it's not actually good, it's actually quite bad here. Regardless, Bob the Grob will have a very hard time finding the right response in the time pressure, and I was right in the game. Now, instead of this, rook to f4 was the right idea, the point being the rook is out of the attack and everything is good. Instead, h6 played in the game, pressuring the rook, threatening checkmate in one move with the help of the alpha 0 h-pawn. Black goes rook g6, a decent idea. Now here, the computer gives h7 check, the point being potentially if king takes, then this pawn will be undefended. For example, h7, king takes, queen takes f7 could be one idea. Now, instead of that here, I play queen to f4, sliding the queen back, defending the pawn, and maintaining the tension. But it turns out this move right here was a bit of a massive mistake. Obviously, black can simply capture the rook on the f3 square, which he does in the game. Bishop takes, g takes, and then black goes queen to g5, sliding his queen over. But again, at this point, he has 5 seconds left on the clock, so forcing Bob the Grob to run out of time was my main concern. So let's see how it ends. Queen takes, rook takes, king to h3, king to h7, king h4, king takes h6, f4 pressures the rook. Bob the Grob has 2 seconds left. Rook d5, king g4, rook d2, knight f5 check, hits the king, and here my opponent simply runs out of time. So honestly, a pretty good start to the game, pretty good middle game play, but towards the end of the middle game, I'm going to be honest, I started making some massive tactical mistakes. So shame on me for doing that. But as far as the one tip from this video, in terms of plan formation, let's zoom into this position. Let's go all the way up after h4 and then g4 and so on right here. So at this point, so far I've moved, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 out of 7 moves were pawn moves, but from here I had to find the right placement for my pieces. Obviously, there really aren't any other good pawn moves left. Now here, with this pawn structure, again, f3 is being guarded by that pawn, therefore knight f3 is not really a possibility. So what can I do instead? Well, in this case, I thought knight e2, then g3, then bishop e2, bishop f4, and then queen d2 was the right idea. And I knew that because I played these openings before in the past. I played very similar positions in the past, and I know with this kind of pawn structure, with the weaknesses of these squares like f5 and so on, that this formation was the way to go in this position. So this is my one real tip for you. If you play the same openings over and over, let's say you have openings you like, openings you enjoy, openings where you understand what you're doing and where the pieces go. If you play those openings and master them and analyze your games over time, you will really start to see where all the pieces go, and that will make formulating plans so much easier in your games. Like this plan right here, with all the pieces going to these perfect squares. I've done this so many times in my own games that I didn't really have to think about it. I mean, this pawn is vulnerable, otherwise queen d2 was the idea by me, and I've done this so many times in the past, it was just autopilot, and I sort of autopiloted my way to a massive, massive advantage on move 11 in this game. And again, that is my tip. Making plans from scratch can be very, very challenging, but if you master your openings, no matter what those openings are, and by master, I just mean if you get to a point where you can play the game and just know where your pieces are supposed to go based on the opening, based on the pawn structure, it makes the game of chess so much easier and so much more enjoyable. So that is my one tip for you. Really try to master your openings to where making plans in those openings is just second nature and easy, and you will win so many chess games that way. All right, Chess YouTube, hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, show me some love, smash that like button, and comment down below what you thought of the game, of the opening and middle game planning, and not, certainly all of the mistakes that I made in the end game there, the tactical mistakes. I'm a little bit tactically weak. I'm good strategically, but a little bit weak tactically. So I will be working on that in the future, but that's a relatively easy fix to make. But anyways, hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, feel free to like and comment. And as always, I wish you the best of luck in your in terms of your chess improvement journey in 2025 and beyond. And I'll see you in the next video.